All right, let's dive into something pretty fundamental today. We're going to talk about the very architecture of knowledge. What is the ultimate foundation that's holding up everything you believe to be true?
I mean, really think about it for a second. Any belief you have, it's based on some reason, right? But then that reason needs its own reason, and that one needs another one. You see where this is going? If every single belief needs a justification, you get stuck in this chain of reasons that just goes on forever. So where does the buck stop?
So here's how we're going to crack this puzzle. First, we'll look at this problem of the endless chain. Then, we're going to rule out a few of the usual suspects for what a foundation could be. After that, we'll introduce this really powerful idea, the self-grounding principle. See how it works, and then, finally, we'll ask the big question. What can actually bear all that?
Okay, let's start with this problem of infinite reasons. Philosophers have a fancy term for it. They call it an infinite regress, and it's a huge, huge flaw in any argument. See, if your justification for a belief always hinges on another justification, you never actually hit solid ground. Your whole structure of knowledge is just kind of floating in midair.
This really nails the problem, doesn't it? If your so-called foundation is just leaning on something else for support, well, it's not a foundation at all. It's just another link in a chain that's not actually connected to anything solid. So what could a real foundation be? Well, before we get to the answer, it's actually super helpful to figure out what it isn't. Let's go ahead and eliminate some of the most common ideas that people come up with.
The things we usually turn to for support, they just don't work here. A foundation can't be a claim, right? Because any claim immediately makes you ask, okay, but how do you know that? It can't be a method either, because then you'd have to prove it's a good method first. And it can't just be an agreement between people, because that assumes we already have rational people who can agree on things, which is the very thing we're trying to find the basis for.
So now that we've kind of cleared the board of what doesn't work, we can finally get to the solution. And it's a concept that just slices right through the problem. It's called the self-grounding principle. And this is a totally different kind of foundation. Now, this definition is super precise, and for good reason. Self-grounding means something that holds itself up. It's not built on top of anything else. It's not pulled from some other source. It just is. Its status doesn't need a stamp of approval from any other principle. It is its own foundation.
Let's be really clear about what this is and what it isn't. A self-grounding principle is not just some random rule we accept on faith, like a dogma that you're not allowed to question. No, it is the very precondition for rational thought itself. Think of it like the operating system that makes asking questions and finding answers even possible to begin with.
Okay, but how can something justify itself without being circular? It sounds a bit like a paradox, right? I am true because I say I'm true. Well, the best way to get your head around it is to think about the rules of a game. This quote from our source just hits the nail on the head. Asking for proof of the thing that makes proof possible, it's a category error. You can't use the tools of proof to justify the tools themselves. It's like trying to use a ruler to measure itself. The question just doesn't make sense. Let's just walk through this. Step 1. Any logical proof you build uses the laws of logic. That's a given, which means, step 2, your entire proof is already assuming that logic works. So, you see, step 3, you can't use a logical proof to prove that logic is valid. You'd be assuming the very thing you're trying to prove. And this is the key, step 4, that doesn't make logic weak or irrational. It's what makes it foundational. It's the ground that all proof has to stand on. All right, let's bring this all together for our final conclusion. We've seen that knowledge can't be some endless chain, and its foundation isn't a simple claim or a method. We figured out that this foundation has to be self-grounding. So, what does that leave us with? Here's the big takeaway. If you insist that everything requires a justification, then logically, nothing can ever be truly justified. It's a dead end. So it is a logical necessity that something has to exist which does not require justification. Not because it's a special exception to the rules, but because it is the foundation the rules themselves are built on. And that leaves us with one last, pretty profound question. We've established that a self-grounding foundation has to exist for knowledge to even be possible. But what kind of thing? What principle, what reality is actually capable of bearing that incredible weight? Now that is something to think about.